And the truth is,
Right.
like, one of the mistakes, and it's just one of the traps I write about in the book, I call it value misstacking, is you get it wrong. And you perceive that the higher value is either emotional or it's functional, and you stack incorrectly in your messaging and your content and the way you train your salespeople, and you leave a lot of value on the table.
Welcome to the Lean Scale Podcast, where we talk about everything RevOps. Thank you for listening.
Like, what's the high order bid here? How will the market perceive my promise of impact? And should I lead with these functional promises, or should I lead with these emotional promises about performance narratives and board level work that inspire confidence to move forward, feeling like you can act with confidence through a data driven approach? And like, you can really think, and I know we went through this, like, it can really almost drive you crazy, like trying to contemplate which of these two brand choices are going to make the most sense. And the truth is,
Right.
like, one of the mistakes, and it's just one of the traps I write about in the book, I call it value misstacking, is you get it wrong. And you perceive that the higher value is either emotional or it's functional, and you stack incorrectly in your messaging and your content and the way you train your salespeople, and you leave a lot of value on the table. Or the other common mistake is that you just throw it all up in the air, like, the old spaghetti on the wall analogy, as if the market will sort it out. But when you raise the cost of customer thinking, you never get rewarded. You get punished, because it is not the job of the marketplace to figure this out for you. It's your job as the marketer, the executive, the product person. And again, it's, this becomes, I think, the vacuum that's existed through my experience in business. If people were just never trained to understand how to do this scientifically. And so, that sort of led to my investigation into this idea of, like, okay, if the key to success is to understand value exchange events, how do you measure value? And the only unit of measure we use is price. But price and value are totally different things. So using price as a way to understand how the market will perceive value is a very sort of last minute, it's a last minute balancing concept, which is why I don't think in terms of economic value anymore. I think in terms of worthiness. So at the end, if you have effectively identified your superpower, its value type, this thing you can uniquely deliver that no one else can, or that you can deliver better than most other alternatives, and you stack your value correctly, you'll have to bring that into balance by making the offer worth it in the mind of the buyer. And yes, it means you'll have to put a price on it, but putting a price on it has nothing to do with the way people will initially perceive this idea of, well, how effective will the tool be? And how will it make me feel? Looking at a price answers none of those questions. So I needed another way to measure, like, the idea of a unit of value in all three categories. And there was no way to measure it. So I made one up. And that led to this idea of the concept of, hey, how does the universe organize itself? Well, through the force of gravity, which is largely an equation which says, heavier objects will pull less heavy objects toward them. That's the attractive force of gravity. And that felt somewhat like the way the relationship between vendors and customers worked. And so I said, okay.
Yeah, no, I really love that metaphor, and it's throughout the entire book, and it's completely changed my perspective of how I think of business and value. And every time I look at any any value exchange situation, I can't stop thinking about the metaphor. And so I know you talk about gravity, and I know you tagline it as gravity, the universal law of business. And I think it just makes so much sense. And I'd love for you to dive into that and why you chose that, and give all the examples that you feel like the metaphor just relates so well to business.
Well, I didn't want to have to create a way to think of how to measure a unit of value. Like
a nice number would have been nice, right? Rather than needing to use a metaphor, but you're kind of forced to.
I didn't, it's hard. Like, talking outside of, existing frameworks and using non-conventional terms, always just makes it harder for an idea to break through. But as much as I tried not to use the metaphor of saying, like, look, let's think about value the way we think about gravity. If you have a lot of, if an object is heavy, meaning it has a lot of mass, it will attract an object with less mass. So we could start with that. There's that aspect of, like, the idea that something cool has a high net gravity score is great, but you have to deconstruct how you achieve a high gravity score. So the first element of understanding how to achieve this high gravity score would be to understand, well, how much mass does the offer have? Meaning innately, before it leaves, the basement of the R&D lab, just innately, in and of itself, how likely is it that some innovation will have high value before the market perceives it at all? Like, if you've invented some breakthrough technology, like, before the market knows about it, it's extremely valuable. And so I refer to the innate value of any offer as just its mass. Like, just sitting there, how much mass does it have? Okay, well, we know that there's not just one object in the universe, right? So you can have an object with mass, but what are you trying to do? And marketers for years have been using this term, hey, look, we're creating pull. And I thought, wow, like, yeah, that's really what they are doing. An object with mass will pull a customer towards it. So, I started imagining, a world where, your innovation enters the market. It creates a dent in the fabric of the marketplace because it has mass. Now, if an object, meaning your customer's close enough to your offer and they know about it, like, look, I knew about Lean Scale because we know each other. So, but how else would I have known about you if we didn't have an existing relationship? Like, I would have had to have watched your podcast, or I would have had to somehow Googled RevOps as a service and found you. Like, all the extra work that has to go into getting the effect. The second kind of gravity that can create pull is what I just call proximity. And that's more or less where what most companies focus on. The idea that if we build something cool and get it close enough to our customer, we should be able to create some value exchange, and we should get rewarded for our efforts. And that was, I mean, honestly, Anthony, that was probably the majority of my career was based on that thinking of, like, let's have a really cool roadmap. Let's build really cool products. Let's get as close to the customer as we need to be. If it's an enterprise customer, it's all the high touch stuff. And if it's an SMB customer, it's more of a volume, low touch thing. And, you try to be efficient on that intimacy scale, depending on the offer. And it's cool. Like, that basic idea always, was in my mind, but it wasn't enough, because if that's all you had to do, you would think, like, it wouldn't be so hard to be a unicorn. So I knew something else we had to account for another force. And the force that gets overlooked the most is the gravity of alternatives. And I like to say, and like what you want when you innovate, you want an offer that has mass out the ass. That's kind of the little cute way I like to describe. Like, yeah, you want mass, more mass the better. But what people have to understand is the gravity of alternatives has mass out the ass. Enterprise renewal rates for the last 20 years haven't changed. Once a company buys an enterprise product, they're renewing at north of 90%, even for like the third and fourth and fifth best product in the market. For the market leader, we know they're renewing at almost 100%. We know that net positive churn best practices, like you're monetizing at 135% of the prior transaction. So you're going even beyond the idea of dominating the market. You're extracting the market plus this premium on top through upsell and cross-sell. So the gravity of alternatives has to be accounted for when you think about this idea of like, well, how the hell are we going to win? Like, how are we going to win? We build something that has mass, we bring it closer to customers, but we face this immense opposing gravity because we're not the only object in the universe. Like in cybersecurity, there's 5,000 cybersecurity companies, 5,000. The world maybe needs 50, and there's 5,000.
Right.
So all of these alternatives are drowning the buyers. They're drowning out our voice. And even if our product has mass, and even if we achieve proximity, how do we rip the customer out from the gravity that holds them in place, the gravity of the next best alternative? And so I thought, look, we have to account for this idea that, look, other gravity is holding my customer in place, preventing a value exchange event. So that became the third form of gravity, which I call anti-gravity. And then occasionally you can sort of get a fusion level event where you almost get rewarded in a non-linear fashion. And it's when things get, essentially either because of timing or because of how significant it could become to get a job done. Like I was in the antivirus industry like 20 years ago, and imagine, everyone woke up one day and the computers were sick. Like out of the complete vacuum of space, suddenly a multi-billion-dollar industry was born.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you liked the discussion, please like, share, and subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode.